Muchas gracias. Y es un gran placer estar aquí con vosotros hoy. Gracias, Anod, por su invitación. Tengo solamente 20 minutos, entonces necesito hablar más rápido. In English, okay? So I'm going to talk a little bit about the econometric area of hosting sport events. And of course, we saved this till the last session today because we know that everyone in the room is very much interested. Are there any economistas in the room today, by chance? Excellent. None. They've all gone home. Just a couple of real broad strokes comments before we get started, and who we are, who our organization is. We're the Canadian Sport Tourism Alliance. And this is very important. We're a non-governmental, not-for-profit tourism industry organization. So non-governmental. We don't receive any funding from any government sources, although we do have a number of government entities as clients of ours. We were formed in November of 2000, so it's about 14 years old in a couple of weeks. And I was hired to start the organization back at that time. Based on some industry trends that were showing in Canada, at least, that sport travel was becoming a lot more popular and a more significant part of the Canadian tourism industry at that time. And we started with 18 founding municipal members. Those are primarily the large cities in Canada, the Montreals, Vancouvers, Torontos, Ottawas. And we've grown, we've actually experienced exponential growth. We have over 400 members today, which include almost 150 municipalities. And those municipalities could be made up of, could be an economic development agency, it could be a convention and visitors bureau, it could be a parks and recreation department, all kinds of municipal linkages, primarily because of the economic benefits associated with hosting sport events in our country. We also have about 200 national and provincial sport organizations who are members of ours as well, all of the national sport organizations in Canada. And we have an education category which now numbers, I think, about 32 post-secondary educational institutions, either colleges or universities, who either offer a sport management program, event management program, or in some cases, a sport tourism course within that program. We are not a funding agency, okay, and that distinguishes us from many of the organizations at the national level throughout the world. I'm thinking Sport Denmark, UK Sport and Investment, for example, Event Scotland, who are funding agencies. We are not a funding agency. We are a capacity building organization. And what I mean by that is that we provide the tools and the expertise to help our members become a lot more effective, proficient, and professional in bidding for, winning the right to host and to execute sport events in their communities for a variety of public policy objectives, okay? We also have as part of our objectives to promote Canada as a preferred host for international sport events. We do that through a variety of initiatives at the international level. So here's the problem that we were faced with, back in the very early days of our organization's formation. And it was that there was a lot of skepticism, and there still is to some extent, about the whole area of economic impact and how it was measured at the time. And in Canada, about 14 years ago, there were, I would say, close to 20 economic impact models that were being used across the country, all based on different assumptions, different multipliers built into the model, to those models, and very different methodologies in terms of collecting the data that was actually used as the inputs to those models. So why was this such a key issue for us at that time? Well, in Canada, there's a significant investment by the federal government in hosting international sport events. There's a number of provinces across the country who have international hosting programs that provide funding support for those programs. And what we're seeing now is that municipal governments are getting much more involved in providing grassroots funding for sport events as well. And so with that increased public sector investment in sport events came an increase, and some might say an exponential increase, in the accountability for the spending of those public funds. In addition to that, governments very much interested in the whole notion of the ROI related to their investment. You know, the return on the investment that they're making in sport, into sport events, okay? So what we did was we led an initiative that brought the key players together in the industry segment, that involved the Canadian Tourism Commission, our national tourism body, very much interested in and active in international marketing for Canada. Sport Canada, which is the largest public sector funder of sport in the country, a federal government agency. The Destination Marketing Association of Canada, which regroups all of the destinations, destination convention visitors bureaus, for example, and Skate Canada, who had been using economic impact projections as part of their site selection process for their national championship program and their Skate Canada international events, in addition to any world championships that they host from time to time in Canada as well. And we engaged the Canadian Tourism Research Institute, which is the preeminent organization in Canada that develops input-output models as it relates to the tourism industry, to develop a model on our behalf. It's the first web-based tool of its kind in the world, specifically created to measure predict and measure the economic impact of a sport event on a host community. And this model, as is the case with all of our other tools that we've developed, is available to all of our members through a secure access portal on our website. Now, I think some of there should have been a circular that the girls circulated outside with a whole list of some of the industry tools that we've developed since our inception in November of 2000. And it's without question, the launch of this tool has changed the landscape in Canada as it relates to hosting sport events. It's had the greatest impact because for the first time, an industry segment within our country has developed the capacity to quantify the activity that's happening within its industry segment. So we're very pleased about that. Why use the model? Well, it's a feasibility tool. Okay, it'll help event organizers determine whether, in fact, the event makes fiscal sense or not. Okay, it's part of a risk assessment toolkit. Accountability, did it deliver on its promises? So, in fact, if you're predicting that the event will have a specific impact in a variety of areas, you can go back and check to see whether it actually delivered. It helps you go through that due diligence process as well, to cover all of the bases. It helps you develop those public and private sector partnerships. And in fact now, in Canada, a prediction based on that's generated by the STEAM model has become a required element for any submissions to hosting programs at the national and at the many provincial levels. And it also adds a standardized approach to economic impact assessment, which allows you to do a comparative analysis on events that are occurring in a variety of areas of the country. So let's talk a little bit about what the inputs are required to run this model. And the first is you will be required to have some visitor estimates, okay? You need to be able to project the number of out-of-town visitors and participants attending the event. Okay, so participants could be athletes, they could be coaches, they could be referees, officials, anyone who plays an official role within the event, and the spectators who actually come to spectate at the event. In some cases, many spectators, in others, family and friends. Second input area is operational expenditures. Okay, you need to have some idea of what the budget of the organizing committee is to be able to input into the model. And we have a variety of categories that accepts inputs in this area. And, you know, same thing. In some cases, there's a significant operation or organizational committee budget. In other cases, sometimes none. The third area is capital expenditures. And this is the one that creates a significant output in terms of GDP and otherwise, because if there are significant capital expenditures, for example, like the Pan American Games that were hosted in Guadalajara and we're hosting in Toronto next year, the expenses related to that capital investment is required to be put into the model as well. And so what happens is once you've got that data, you input it based on the visitor estimates, the operational expenditures, and the capital costs, basically goes into the STEAM model where the visitor spending profiles are already embedded in the model. Okay? So as a predictive model, this is applicable to events that are occurring in the future. Okay? And we actually have a built-in inflationary effect. I think it's 1.5% a year for the next 8 years. So if you're hosting or bidding on an event in 2021, for example, you can pull down on the pull-down menu 2021, and it will automatically calculate the inflationary effect until that time. And then, in addition, the economic impact multipliers are based and embedded in there as well. And what then happens is the outputs that are created with the model include things like GDP, gross domestic product, which is the new spending that's occurring in the community as a result of hosting the event, number of jobs, wages and salaries, and the taxes that are generated that accrued to both federal, provincial, and municipal governments as a result of the spending in the area. Okay? So the STEAM model is a predictive model. Solution number 2 is STEAM Pro. Okay, in STEAM Pro, the difference between STEAM and STEAM Pro involves the collection of primary data on site at your sport event. And that means collecting spending data via either intercept survey, or in a number of cases, we do that electronically through post-event email surveys. And so what we do is we create a customized survey for an event organizer on the latest survey software available on the market today. We'll provide the event organizer with a quantity of handheld computers. We'll load the survey onto those computers. We produce a research field manual which basically outlines the standards by which the data is collected, and a survey training module that we go on site and deliver to the event organizer itself as well. And so what I'll do in the last few minutes is just give you an idea in terms of some of the outputs on selected events that we've conducted these assessments on. Okay, and the first would be an event that no one's ever heard of, I'm sure, in this room, okay, but we consider it a best practice. And the reason that we do is because it kind of checks all of the boxes that you would identify as key for a sport tourism event. Okay, and the first is that it occurs between the kind of the Christmas and the New Year time period. And that's the time period where the kids are out of school, the parents are likely not working. The age group that's been selected for this group is 10 to 11-year-old kids, okay? So that means that there's a real high probability that the parents and siblings are going to travel to that event with their kids. And in addition, this event in 2005 drew 407 teams. Since that time, the event peaked at, I believe, 525 teams, with about 475 coming from outside of the region. Okay, and this event draws from all over North America through the United States, and even now teams from Europe and China are attending. But it's for 10 and 11-year-old kids. They've added a girls division, which has really increased the participation rate. And you can see the effect that it's had on the community in a very, what we would call a shoulder season. When there's lots of room in the hotels and the restaurants are empty during the holiday season. 4.9 million GDP. The significant impact on taxes at the municipal, provincial, and federal level, and the number of volunteers that are required to conduct these events is significant as well. I like using FINA. Okay, FINA was hosted, that's the World Aquatic Championships, hosted in Montreal in 2005. And this event had all the makings of a disaster. It struggled from one crisis to another. The event, in the end, was an aesthetic success, a tremendous aesthetic success, and it generated significant economic benefits for the city of Montreal. 72 million in GDP. A lot of that was directly related to the infrastructure that they built for that event. Significant amount of taxes generated, and the out-of-town spectators, and particularly spectators from the United States and from Europe. The thing about this event is that even though it generated 72 million in terms of GDP, this event lost $10 million on the bottom line, okay, which teaches us really that there is no correlation necessarily between the economic benefits that accrue to a community that actually hosts an event and whether, in fact, the event broke even. Okay, so that's part of a risk assessment strategy that all event organizers need to be aware of. The FIFA U20 event was the largest single sport event that was ever hosted in Canada. Okay? 6 cities right across the country: Vancouver, Edmonton, Toronto, Ottawa, Montreal, and Moncton. It was truly a coast-to-coast event. And look at the numbers: 114 million GDP, and again, significant investment in infrastructure contributed greatly to that. But the other thing is that the power that I think we recognize as Canadians of a FIFA event, and the 48,000 international visitors that traveled to Canada to spectate at that event in communities right across the country. And that has contributed to great expectations for the FIFA Women's World Cup, which will be hosted in those same 6 cities next year in Canada in 2015. The Ottawa Race Weekend, it's a marathon weekend. It's a very popular event, and the whole marathon landscape in Canada is extremely vibrant. And this is one of the largest events in the country, with almost 50,000 participants and a tremendous effect. And this event is it's basically a Thursday to Sunday event. So you're looking at 2 or 3 nights in a hotel, and the number of participants is staggering in some cases. And again, the significant number of volunteers that's required to conduct an event like this as well. This one, I just wanted to point out what some of our challenges are, and really it's it's really down. If you look at the left-hand side here, it's the number of person visits, unique person visits. And you can see from 2011 to 2012, it's pretty flat, 1.7%. Okay, on the other side is the visitor expenditures. And the one concern here is that number right there. It's, spending is down about 5% from US travelers. Okay, and our challenge, even though we're very happy with the 5.3% increase over that period of time, okay, we're a little bit concerned about our ability to continue to attract US visitors, because the US visitor is critical to Canada's tourism industry into the future. Just one last point. We were ranked second as a host nation after Russia by SportCal, Sports Market Intelligence, as a company, an agency out of the UK. And I think it's a good recognition that of the number of sport events that we've hosted. We host on an average of over 50 international sport events a year since 2008. And we are committed to achieve the #1 spot within the next 2 years. The fastest growing grassroots economic development initiative in Canada today, and thank you for your time.